Hello and welcome. Thought it would be interesting today to tackle interpretive subject in the Bible. This idea of cherubs and seraphs, how that might fit in with the meta narrative. And if we look, just kind of a thesis statement that cherubs in the Bible serve as kind of sentinels or door guards, if you will, to keep people out of the Garden of Eden, that is, people who don't have access anymore. Eden means pleasure. That's what the word Garden of Eden means in Hebrew. And at the center of this garden is God's enthroned glory. The biblical text, Hebrew text, talks about rivers of pleasures. I think that's Psalm 16, and it uses the word Edens, rivers of pleasures, plural, are at his right hand forevermore. And it's God's presence that makes all this so. So cherubs function in the Bible as kind of people who keep treasonous sinners out of this garden of pleasure. If we go to a Bible tool like Logos Bible software, this is our text, and you can follow along in the English Standard Version if you'd like. But the first mention is of cherubs is involved when the Lord God is exiling Adam from the Garden of Eden. There's Eden, and he's going to have to work the Adamah, so the Adam and the Adamah, work the Adamah from which he was taken. And then the text at the end of chapter 3 says, and he, so I think that's the Lord God is the subject, he drove out the Adam. So that's really interesting. Have the definite article. And you can see in English they're translating it just the man, but you can see the word is Adam. He drove out the Adam, and he made him dwell. That's a Hiphiel from the east. And I think what's going there is when the tabernacle is oriented, it's made to look like the worshiper is coming back to the Garden of Eden, approaching the entryway to Eden. It says, and so God caused to dwell the cherubs. And, if we use the resource, we can click on it, click on the root, and then say, show me all the places it appears. And what we end up with is something like this. And I think it said there are 91 times it's used. And so, we could just work through those if we wanted. And so in my study notes, and I think I will link this in the description, I've done that. So just put, if you click on there, it will pull up all the 91 times. Just some ideas that the cherubs enforced the decree to drive out and to keep out all the treasonous sinners from Eden. That's probably the big meta-narrative picture. They exclude treasonous the Adam from the tree of life, and this means that Adam and Eve and all their natural offspring are excluded. Images of cherubs are throughout the tabernacle and temple. They're, every direction you look, almost covered with cherubs are everywhere. They guard the way to the Holy of Holies. God speaks to Moses from between the two cherubs. He promises to meet his people between the cherubs. blood on the Day of Atonement is placed between the cherubs. And if you think about it, that blood on that day, it would look like, if there's blood between two cherubs, it would look like that someone had tried to go back into the Garden of Eden and they had perished. The same idea is with the veil. Blood is sprinkled on the cherubs. Eventually it would obliterate the appearance of cherubs there. Touching the Ark of the Covenant means instant death. David was commanded by God to make a copy of the Torah. He was commanded that in Deuteronomy 17. He did not do that. He was told to read from it every day, and so when he used his best judgment to move the ark, he had not been studying the Torah, and so he got Uzzah killed because he was carrying the ark the wrong way. I wonder if when Jesus ushers Mary Magdalene into the true Holy of Holies, his grave, with blood between the two seated angels, I wonder if they're somehow representing cherubs. Mary's kind of the representative of all the people who will be brought back into the Holy of Holies. And Mary's a transformed sinner, so the idea of bringing people back into the Garden of Eden, I wonder if something like that. I think Gerhardus Voss may develop that idea in biblical theology. I should have had the quote, but I think that's true. And then, you have the idea, do Peter and the apostles somehow replace cherubs when Jesus ultimately gives them and their teaching the keys to the kingdom, where they're the ones excluding or admitting, and their apostolic doctrine excluding or admitting people to the heavenly Holy of Holies. Some interesting things, just odd bits about cherubs. They're on the ark, each end of the mercy seat. I wonder if ultimately, of course, ark, if we had time to do Hebrew word study, it's the same word coffin at the end of Genesis there. Joseph is placed in an achron, I think is the word, and then the Ark of the Covenant. So you've got this word that's kind of associated somehow with death. And maybe the fulfillment of that in terms of the meta-narrative is when Jesus dies and the bloody grave clothes are there, and yet God is truly meeting his people between the cherubs. In Ezekiel, you have cherubs. You don't know they're cherubs at first, but in chapter 10, Ezekiel tells us that what he's looking at are cherubs. They seem to be picking up the same description in Revelation 4:7 of the four living creatures. They both have the same faces. You can see cherubs everywhere, these verses. The Lord is enthroned on cherubs, and text speaks of riding on a cherub. I think we'll do another video on this seraph. This is a really interesting study, but we'll save that for next time. Some interesting things as we look at this, just in terms of kind of pictures. This is something I found on Wiki, an ivory plaque from Megiddo, and notice you have a king sitting enthroned on a a throne with creatures, winged creatures. I wonder if that's kind of um, the way they think of the Lord enthroned, or at least part of the background there. I didn't really see a date for this, but I wonder what the connection is there. You do have a throne of Astarte um, that has a winged figure, her throne there. Um, I found this picture a long time ago from a person RKT 2002, and I love this picture because it's picturing Ezekiel's cherubs on the Ark of the Covenant, and the whole bottom part is animal-like with hoofed feet, and then fourfold faces facing each other and facing out. Perhaps that may help solve the apparent conflict that Moses' cherubs are facing each other, and then in Chronicles they appear to be facing out. I think the Babylonian Talmud has a different take, but I don't know, something to think about. On the Day of Atonement, blood was placed between the cherubs. And I got this image from the internet many years ago, but imagine if there were a lot of blood there. It would look like the cherubs had slaughtered someone who had tried to come back to the Garden of Eden. I love this picture of Priscilla Silver that she did with the four faces described in Ezekiel. Ran across a website, Many Mana Moments, and just a collection of some of the cherub-like figures. Of course, here you've got the cherubs and the flaming sword exiling Adam and Eve from Eden. It makes me wonder if there isn't some kind of macro typology when Israel is driving the Canaanites out. They're excluding treacherous, sinful rebels from God's land flowing with milk and honey. I wonder if that's how we're to read this. Solomon's description with, I think, his 15 feet tall, and if the ark is the same dimensions as it was under Moses, then kind of a much smaller thing, and God saying, I'll meet you there. So this idea of coming into the Edenic presence of God. I think this is probably from the Full of Eyes website, but the same idea, the way to the tree of life. God's chariot throne, and in Hebrew, this clear thing is called the rakia, and of course the rakia is in Genesis 1. It's functioning kind of like a heavenly veil. We probably meet that same thing in, I think it's Revelation 15, with this fiery waters. When people pass through it, they sing the song of Moses, so kind of going into the presence of God, the whole idea in Revelation with the rainbow and all of this, wheels within a wheel and cherubs picking up the ideas in Ezekiel. Similar one, I'm not sure where this is from, but another depiction there. This is interesting. A Neo-Assyrian seal, I think, is from Wiki 2, and this is about 1,000 BC with the whole multi-winged messenger. Um, Again, the cherubs excluding Adam and Eve, like the fourfold faces here. Um, Logos Bible software has excellent resources, and I love this. Faith Life, the whole idea of cherubs, and you really get the idea of the Garden of Eden here with trees and cherubs and the presence of God, and a provision being made way back into. Same thing from Logos gives you a little idea just how small the Ark of the Covenant is, of course, with two cherubs on top. A different an idea in terms of orientation. I'm a little unclear when you work through the Hebrew text which way the carrying poles go. Holman Book of Biblical Charts, similar, maybe a little more Egyptian-looking one. ESV Study Bible, you get kind of the small coffin idea. NLT Study Bible, very similar, shows you just how small. Jason DeRoshi has an Old Testament introduction and trying to represent the covering cherubs there, the older McClintock and Strong. German resource here, again, much more Egyptian looking. But the idea is when you understand that these cherubs exclude people, in the meta-narrative, they're meant to help us realize that as sinners, we're excluded from the Garden of Eden. And the reason we're excluded, we're reminded at the beginning of Leviticus that God is calling, inviting us in, but the problem is we don't live the kind of holy life that can exist with a holy God. And so what the Bible is telling us is God's come up with a way to fix that. And so when Jesus died, the text tells us the veil was ripped. Matthew tells us, and the picture is that the excluding cherubs has been taken out of the way to the Garden of Eden has been opened. When we come to Revelation and the four living creatures, it seems that you can understand them in terms of the cherubs, but the odd thing is that they're not killing people. The worshipers are with God. Because Jesus, as the mediator of the new covenant, has made a way for them to be holy. And so the worshipers in New Jerusalem, in this new temple of New Jerusalem, aren't excluded anymore because Jesus had made a way for them to be in the restored Garden of Eden. So that's what I have. Be interested in your comments. Look forward to talking to you next time. Thanks.